Hello, my galactic quasars. This is Shade of a Hero by Creator of the Mind, read by Supernova Podfix. Chapter 19 Questions and Answers. Summary. Ochako asks for training, Shota gets a migraine, and Izuku finds something. Ochako was fired up, marching through the halls of UA. The crowd parted before her as she made her way to homeroom. She thrust the door open with a bang, causing several of her classmates to jump. She scanned the room before her eyes locked onto a small boy with curly green hair. Striding over, she then slammed her hands down onto his desk, eyes burning with determination. "Train me!" A pair of green eyes that might have been mildly surprised looked up at her. Midoriya's head tilted in what could have been interpreted as confusion. "Train you?" he asked slowly, voice soft. No, I have to get stronger, and you can get me there. I know you can. She paused, gathering her wits before she continued under his dark gaze. "I won't take no for an answer." Black eyes, were his eyes green? Bore into her soul, judging her, while all she could do was pray that she could hold up to their scrutiny. If the being those eyes belonged to didn't deem her enough, well, she didn't want to think about what might happen. Finally, the hold over her broke, and she released the breath she didn't even know she was holding. Then, for the first time since she'd met him, Midoriya's lips twitched, making what could almost be interpreted as a slight smile. It felt more like a predator baring its teeth in amusement than friendly. A small spark lingered in his eyes for a second before his expression immediately went blank again. "All right." One word, and she almost collapsed from relief. But before she could thank him, a piece of paper had been shoved into her hands, an address and a time written on it. Midoriya had already gone back to writing. Was that a map? And his notebook, clearly dismissing her. Gripping the paper tight, she grinned as she staggered over to her desk. Shota was beginning to regret his life decisions. When Uraraka had burst into the class filled with palpable determination, he wasn't sure what to expect. Her going over to the resident problem child and possibly eldritch being, but he wasn't telling anyone that theory yet, and asking him to train her and then having him agree, well, that wasn't even on the list of possibilities. After watching Midoriya give the equivalent of a feral grin after her question made him want to curl up and sleep forever, he could not do that, so he did the second best viable thing. "Today, I was asked to announce that the sports festival will be taking place in a week." The class immediately erupted into yelling. That sleeping bag was looking awfully good right now. It had been an interesting day for Izuku. One of his classmates asked him to train her. The rest of his classmates had been avoiding him like the plague, though he could tell it was more out of fear of him than malice, and the announcement of a school-wide sports festival that made leaving everyone in his class talking about it for the rest of the day. At the end of the day, a crowd of students had gathered at the class door and had basically made a declaration of war against Class 1A. A bit dramatic, if anybody asked them. He easily slipped past them and started on his way home when something caught his eye. Something shiny was laying innocuously on the ground and practically begging him to pick it up. It was small, the size of a coin, and easily fitting into the palm of his hand. It was round and a deep red, tendrils flaring out at the top as it engulfed in flame. Four glowing orange eyes looked out from its face. On the back was a small pin. It was the first charm they had ever gotten. The familiar warmth that it gave off was soothing, reminding them of a home that might not have been as distant as they thought it was. Chapter 20 Sports Festival. Start. Summary. Uraraka's ready. Shinso's ready. Midoriya regrets his life. The UA Sports Festival, TM. A time to have fun, friendly competition where you kick your schoolmates' asses and crush their dreams. Truly, there was no better way to build camaraderie. 1A had been preparing for this the past couple of weeks, and Ochako was no exception, though she was starting to mildly regret asking Midoriya to train her. She didn't think she'd ever been this sore in her entire life. Seriously, what did his mother feed him? But even after just 2 weeks of training, she could feel the difference. She held herself differently, and she'd even managed to dodge a couple of Midoriya's hits, where she learned that he was apparently holding back because he started moving even faster. But she could confidently say she was ready. Hitoshi felt like he was going to be sick. He wasn't ready for this. Why did he think he was ready for this? He was just a Gen Ed student. He didn't have any of that fancy hero training that 1A and 1B had. Hell, he didn't even have an offensive quirk. Oh god, he was going to fail so badly and everyone was going to laugh at him. He was a failure. Why did he think he even stood a chance at this? Why did he? Representative Midoriya Izuku. What? He stared, stunned, as the small green-haired boy made his way up to the microphone. Midoriya. The boy who looked like he couldn't be past his first year of middle school. The boy who didn't even have a quirk to compete. Midoriya had gotten first in the entrance exam against an army of robots? What did his parents feed him? Midoriya stood there silently for several seconds, confidently staring down the crowd. Finally, he said a soft, "Good luck," and strode off the stage. He felt his tension ease, and a smile made its way onto his face. A challenge. He could work with that. After the audience quieted down, Midnight got up onto the stand, announcing that the first challenge was an obstacle course. Following the rest of the students to the starting line, Hitoshi's eyes were filled with determination, as Midoriya's challenge echoed through his head. He could do this. If Izuku could feel, which he could not, he would probably be feeling regret. And he got first in the entrance exam, which apparently meant he had to give the opening speech. They did not want to give the opening speech. They hated talking. Why did they have to do this? Could they just opt out, or was it too late? Why didn't he get any forewarning? He was not good at speeches. Standing on the raised platform in front of a microphone while staring down an audience whose sole attention was on him did not make thinking of something to say any easier. He'd been standing there for a good while, and the audience and the rest of the school were starting to get antsy. He took a breath. The audience tensed, leaning forward in anticipation. Good luck. He walked off the stage and back to his class. Well, there you have it, folks. President Mike's voice rang through the stadium awkwardly. The audience gave a few smattering claps. God, this was going to suck. Chapter 21. Off to the races. Summary. Midoriya gets second, Uraraka and Hitoshi start a rivalry, and a familiar figure watches. He was tense, waiting for the signal to go. His eyes flitted over the other students surrounding him. They shifted around nervously in the small area that they had all been shoved into. He briefly made eye contact with Uraraka and Shinso before bringing his gaze back to the front of the tunnel. The signal blared, and he immediately launched over the crowd of students. He felt a bit naked without his nail on him in this type of scenario, but he's sure he'll survive. Rushing out into the glaring sun, he was met with the ground rumbling and a large familiar metal arm rushing at him. Diving under the hulking mass, he heard a creaking and quickly glanced back to see the robots encased in ice and his classmate, Todoroki, if he was remembering correctly, hot on his heels. He approached the next obstacle, a giant pit with stone pillars connected by tight ropes. Well, he thought with a sigh, at least I've got great balance. Taking a half step back, he rushed forward, taking long strides with steady footing over the ropes before reaching the first pillar. He paused to survey the best route before continuing on. Shota, what are you feeding that kid? Hisashi exclaimed, half kidding as he stared at the small green-haired kid as he literally sprinted over the large pit. Shota said nothing, simply watching in silence. Hisashi sobered a bit, his gaze turning serious. What's that kid's doing isn't normal, Shota. I know. There's something. He paused, trying to gauge his husband's mood to figure out what to say next. Not right with Midoriya, Shota sighed. I know, but this time Shota was struggling with what he wanted to say. He needs help, Zashi. I don't know why, but he needs help. Hizashi couldn't help but look at his husband in admiration. He really was amazing. He didn't know how Shota could look at whatever Midoriya was and not only see past his own fear, but to recognize something in need of help. Recognize something that no matter how hard Hizashi looked, he still couldn't see. Shinso had acquired a tool. He was pretty sure that the instructors didn't plan on the race being done this way, but they should have thought of that before making such breakable robots. He swung at the incoming robot arms, smashing it before continuing his private race with the pink-cheeked girl from 1A. He wasn't sure how their private competition had started. Maybe it had been when they'd caught each other's gaze for a split second after Midoriya's speech. Actually, in hindsight, that was probably it. But he didn't have time to think about that if he wanted to win this race. Ochako was going to win this. That purple-haired kid from Gen Ed was going to regret challenging her because she was going to crush him. She was a bit behind him when she reached the pit, but she didn't slow down, following Midoriya's lead by running across the tight ropes. She wasn't nearly as agile. She almost fell multiple times, only managing to catch herself using her quirk, but she was keeping a steady pace. She'd passed him by the time she reached the end and was only a bit behind Midoriya, Bakugo, and Todoroki. Reaching the minefield, she carefully towed around the small lumps in the ground. Midoriya had already reached the opening of the tunnel when she heard a loud thwack, bringing her to where the purple hair had dug up a pile of bombs and hit them with a scrap of robot he had gotten at the beginning of the race. The following explosion was loud and shook the ground. It propelled him forward at a breakneck speed. He was going to pass her. He was going to win. She was going to lose. Right as he was zipping past her, she grabbed onto him. Together, they rushed by Midoriya, who was clinging to the tunnel's wall to get out of their way. Together, they crossed the finish line and landed in a heap. "It's a tie!" President Mike's voice yelled, filling the arena and announcing their shared victory, with Midoriya coming second. A figure dressed in red watched a screen. Void black eyes watching a green-haired figure that was so familiar and yet so strange. But she would recognize her sibling anywhere. A line of silk, almost see-through, if not for the sun reflecting off of it. In a blink of an eye, the figure was gone. Chapter 22. A Talk. Summary. Shinso and Uraraka are petty, and Izuku has a talk with Bakugo. Izuku finished second and was now awkwardly standing between two glaring teenagers. He wasn't quite sure what he was supposed to do in this situation. He tried stepping away, but two said teens were tightly holding him in place. "I think I did pretty good," Uraraka said brightly, her mouth forming in a terrifying grin. "Don't you think, Midoriya?" Before Izuku had a chance to answer, the purple-haired teen, Hitoshi, scoffed. "If by pretty good you mean you cheated, then yeah, you did pretty good," the other teen sneered. "Oh, I'm sorry," Uraraka said, while not sounding sorry at all. "I didn't know that using our environment to our advantage was cheating." She punctuated her reply with a falsely sweet smile, which had the purple teen grinding his teeth. "At least I got first using my own skill. You can't really say the same, can you?" Uraraka gave an affronted gasp, finally letting go of Izuku to grab onto the other boy's shirt and haul him towards her. Taking the opening as the gift it was, Izuku quickly slipped away, planning on finding a nice isolated corner before the next match started to settle in. He didn't get far before the loud sound of yelling and explosions reached the stadium as Bakugo rocketed through the exit. "Deku!" The blonde rushed at him, grabbing his collar and hauling him off the ground. "How did you beat me?" he growled out. "How did they beat me?" The hand gripping him was shaking, although the blonde hit it well. "I'm better than you. I'm better than all of you. I can't lose." "You didn't," he mumbled. Bakugo froze, eyes widening slightly. "What?" "You didn't lose," he said a bit louder, eyes meeting Bakugo's shaken red ones. "You got fourth. That's not losing." Bakugo stood there for several seconds, hand loosening its grip, letting Izuku slip out and start walking away from a stunned Katsuki. Katsuki wasn't sure how he was supposed to feel about what he just heard. Maybe fourth wasn't losing, but it wasn't winning either, so it didn't really matter. If you didn't win, you didn't matter, right? That's what all his teachers taught him, and they couldn't be wrong. It was their jobs to know these types of things. But Mr. Aizawa never acted like that. Never said that, and neither did any of the other teachers at UA. He watched silently as the rest of the students filtered in, many gasping for breath as they crossed the finish line. He may have lost this once, but he would not be losing again. Ochako was, at the moment, incredibly frustrated. First, she almost got beaten by the purple-haired kid from Gen Ed. They then they apparently tied. Then, because they tied, she now had to be on the same cavalry battle team as him so they could share points. She couldn't wipe the floor with him if they were on the same team. To make matters worse, he insisted that he would be the head, and she didn't even argue because he made a good point. How was she supposed to argue that she should be on top when she was clearly a better ground combatant and could utilize her quirk far more easily from the ground? So after they settled that much, they both set out to try and find some more people to add to their group. She would have suggested asking Midoriya, but she didn't want to lean on him. She was going to prove herself. Aside from what he seemed to have accidentally assimilated with another group that was headed by a boy from 1B who had blonde hair and gray eyes. Instead, they managed to snag Tokoyami and a girl from the support course who introduced herself as Hatsume. They had a quick planning session where Hatsume gave them support gear she had made, and they decided to focus on defense. They had more than enough points to pass to the next round as long as they kept them. So with that settled, they hefted Hitoshi up. As soon as the signal start was given, the arena devolved into pandemonium. Chapter 23. Teamwork makes the dream work. Monoma Nieto had no idea how the green-haired 1A kid had managed to sneak into his well-constructed team, but he was not happy about it. By the time he had noticed him, it was too late to kick him out, so he settled for giving his meanest sneer and declaring that he was going to be the head of the team whether he liked it or not. Now, Nieto knew he was being petty, and that the rational choice was to let the other boy be head, and he knew that the rest of his teammates thought that too, but before any of them could protest, the 1A kid just approached. He was just about to tell the other boy to back up when he was lifted like he weighed nothing and plopped onto a pair of small shoulders. Now, Nieto wasn't heavy, but he wasn't light either, so to have a 4-foot something of a kid lift him up with ease was a bit disconcerting. He'd been planning on just resting his feet on the boy's shoulders, but apparently the boy was stronger than he looked. At first he thought he must have had a strength-enhancing quirk, unusual given his size, but plausible. It wouldn't have that have been a great quirk to borrow, but apparently it didn't exist, because when he reached out, he felt nothing but an empty void. Nothing was there, but it felt like thousands upon thousands of eyes were boring into his soul, and he pulled back, almost toppling off his new perch. Instead of falling, the boy grabbed his flailing arms and pulled him back upright before turning to face him with a slight cock of his head and eyes completely devoid of emotion. A shiver went down his spine. Before he could inform his teammates that their new addition didn't actually have a quirk, Present Mike gave the warning signal to get ready, and they were all scrambling to get ready before they began. Uraraka, as Hitoshi had learned, was terrifying. She took out enemy after enemy with a vicious sort of grace. That wasn't to say that the rest of the team wasn't pulling their weight. The bird dude, Tokoyami, was doing a great job at fending off their long-ranged attackers. Hatsume's gear was invaluable in allowing them to pull off some of the maneuvers that they were doing, and he had been warding off people from their headband, having stacked the others up on top of it so it would be harder to grab, though he had been attempting to keep his quirk use as minimal as possible, only using it to stun their aggressors so they had enough time to get away. That was all great, but it was nothing compared to what Uraraka was doing. Every time someone managed to get close, she would use her quirk to fling them into the air and then lash out with an efficient punch or kick, sometimes destabilizing the opposing team enough that Tokoyami could cop a headband before they retreated. She would then release her quirk and catch him as he fell from the air. Watching her take down people so easily made him even more determined to keep pulling his weight. He wasn't going to let her outdo him. She was going to win this. She was going to win this. She was going to win this. Another group came close to them and she lashed out, tripping them and snagging their headbands. She was going to show Izuku what she'd learned. She was going to show everyone how strong she'd gotten. She was going to show her parents that they didn't have to worry about her and that she could take care of herself. She was going to make them proud. The boy she got paired with, Shinso, gave the signal and she activated her quirk, Hatsume's boots, launching them into the air just in time to avoid an incoming attack. She let them hang there for a few seconds to survey the arena. Bakugo's team was off to the other side, having a standoff with Todoroki's, and Izuku was, well, that's one way to say that a person is carrying a team. Only he and the blonde guy from 1B were still together. The rest of his team had dispersed across the arena. She was pretty sure that wasn't how you were supposed to do this challenge, but as long as it worked for them, she guessed. Slowly, she floated them back down to the ground. A giant hand reached for the headbands around Shinso's neck before she could swerve them out of the way. Managed to grab several of them before Shinso managed to kick it away. "The 1,000,000 points!" she barked out, staring at him harshly. His smile was all teeth. "Do you think I'm stupid?" He quirked his brow at her and dragged the 1,000,000 points out of their very substantial pile. "I didn't put it on the top." She broke out into what was probably a terrifying grin. She'd know she'd chosen him as a rival for a reason. Nodding her head, she focused back on the challenge. She was going to win this. Chapter 24. Flawless Plan. Their team was surrounded. Todoroki had blocked them off with a giant ice wall, and Bakugo had managed to launch his team in before the wall went up. They all carefully skirted around each other, waiting for the other team to strike first. It wasn't much of a surprise when Bakugo broke to standstill by launching forward to try and snag the 10,000,000 points band from around Shinso's neck. Ochako brought her knee up, blocking him off, of course, and causing Sero to reel him back unless they wanted a disqualification. While they were distracted, Todoroki's team took the opportunity to attack, sending out a wave of ice spikes. They barely managed to dodge, and she clipped herself in the arm, causing a small gash and blood to dribble down her arm. Luckily, it also cut off Bakugo's team's second attack. She clenched her teeth and reached her arms back. "Grab onto my hands, and when I say to, jump!" She felt them both follow her instructions and readied herself. After the week training with Midoriya, she'd realized that she could use her quirk and move heavier objects than she used to be able to. Training her body seemed to help not just her physical strength, but her quirk strength too. Tilting her head back towards Shinso, "Hold on tight." She then turned to Tokoyami. "After we're in the air, I want you to use Dark Shadow to boost us off Bakugo's team." He let out a confused noise at that, but they aren't close enough, and we still have to deal with Todoroki's team. She let herself grin at that. Not for long. Katsuki was laser focused. He was going to get that goddamn headband and prove that he could win. He had to win. He didn't know what he'd do if he didn't. He didn't know who he was if he wasn't the best. Roundface and eye bags won by a fluke. It was dumb luck, and he would prove it. If only fucking Icy Hot hadn't gotten in his way, he'd already have the points by now. Just as he was ready to break the wave of ice spikes that was blocking him, he heard Roundface's voice. "Damn, if only it was Bakugo's team instead of Todoroki's. I mean, he's strong, but he's nowhere near Todoroki's level." He froze. That wasn't fucking true. So what if the guy could freeze a whole building solid? So what if Katsuki wasn't sure if he could actually take him in a fight? He was stronger than all the extras here. How dare Roundface say that? Get us close, he barked out. Kirishima stalled under him. Bakugo, are you sure? It sounds like she's goading. Just do it, he gritted out. Raccoon eyes, melt the ice. Doing as he ordered, she threw her acid onto the ice, causing it to sizzle, but it wasn't going fast enough. All it did do was weaken the ice enough for his explosion to break through in one go. Flexing his hands, his face split into a feral grin. He'd make that bitch regret her words. Shoto's plan would be working perfectly if Bakugo's team hadn't been there, but that didn't matter. As long as the other teams didn't make it in, he could get the 10 million headband. He was sure that he and his team would be able to keep it away from the other two. He'd already managed to separate Bakugo's team from Shinso's, but Uraraka seemed to be planning something, so he had to act fast. He signaled for his team to head forward, and just as he was getting within grabbing distance, the wall of ice that was blocking Bakugo's team exploded. Now! Shinso's team jumped, the boots that they were wearing propelling them into the air with the help of Uraraka's quirk. He didn't understand what they were doing. They hadn't jumped high enough to get over the ice wall, even if it had been near enough for them to try. It wasn't until Tokoyami's quirk emerged and slapped Bakugo and launched them further into the air and closer to the wall that he understood what was happening. As Bakugo's team struggled to keep him from falling to the ground, Todoroki watched in horror, while also feeling impressed at such a well-thought-out, executed plan as they soared over the wall. That did not go like he thought it would, and now he was stuck with only one source of points that also happened to look like he was planning mass murder.